Hello and welcome, everybody. Once again, we are here to help Gordon Dill with consumer expert Diane Lee. We're going to talk about something today, Diane, that I think a lot of people greet almost with a shrug, like a what are you going to do about it? So I can't wait to answer that question.
Yeah, we're talking about data breaches, and it's kind of in one ear, out the other at this point, because we've heard about so many, and you think, I can't really do anything, but there are steps that you definitely need to take.
There's been no shortage of data breaches, and with each new one comes a danger. And I'm not just talking about your information getting compromised. I'm talking about complacency. I'm 7 News consumer anchor Diane Lee with a warning about a new data breach so massive, we'd be foolish not to take this seriously. In this exclusive, your best counterattack strategy against these hackers. Until someone swipes your credit card, takes out a car loan in your name, or taps into your bank account, most of us go on in life with our digital guard down. It's not that we're unaware of the countless data breaches. It's that by now, many of us have become a bit numb.
I think it's just another breach here, another breach there.
I feel like those happen just about every other day.
But the latest hack is so massive and potentially damaging.
Oh my gosh.
It's not your father's data breach. Though as Robert Bacon learned, chances are you or someone in your family has been hit.
This is my grandfather right there.
You may want to make a call.
I think you're right, yeah.
Before we explain how to see if your name is among the 3 billion records compromised, here's what you need to know about the breach. National Public Data, a company that does background checks for things like job interviews, says they were hacked twice this year, and the scope is just coming to light after showing up on the dark web.
We saw that the original database was for sale for $3.5 million on a popular breach website.
Ryan Montgomery with the cybersecurity firm Pen Tester says it's not just the quantity of victims, but the quality of data, full names, birth dates, social security numbers, plus in some cases where you've lived for the last few decades.
How bad is this breach? Why should we care?
This breach is the worst breach I've ever seen, and you should care because dealing with fraud is a pain. It's a simple process to freeze your credit. If you freeze your credit, you take away almost all risks of fraud.
To freeze your credit, just contact the 3 major credit reporting agencies, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. If you need a loan, you can thaw your credit at any time. Now, to figure out if your information has been compromised, Pen Tester has a free online tool. Just enter your first and last name, state of residency, and birth year. Their results redact all but 2 digits of your social, and Pen Tester says the search is not stored on their server.
Looks like you might have been part of this breach. You just let me know if you recognize.
Yeah,
you are.
The data goes back to my childhood home. Well, that's scary. That's definitely scary.
Now, with every major data breach, there's a swarm of phishing attempts trying to get you to reveal more private information. And it's often long after you've forgotten about the breach when the bad actors are most likely to strike.
People that harvest this information have plenty of time, and they have the ability to kind of wait you out.
Derek Davis with the IT company Intelenet in Greenville urges everyone to take these 2 precautions. Log into your Social Security account to verify your information is accurate, and make sure all financial and health accounts have multi-factor authentication.
If you don't have it, you're just a sitting duck.
That definitely does not make me feel very good.
That unease, a powerful reminder that while our data has been leaked, it's up to us to make it as hard as possible for our identity to be misused. So to protect yourself, do consider freezing your credit. It is totally free, and by the way, does not affect your credit score.
My credit's frozen. I think yours is too.
Yeah, definitely. And if anyone hasn't done that and you'd like to, just go to WSBA.com/consumer. You'll find several stories where I make that very easy for you.
We call those man on the street interviews, where you saw it in your story there. You go up to somebody, you say, hey, can I ask you a question about whatever my story's about? Of the people you approached to show them that Pen Tester website and their data, was there anyone who was not part of the leak?
There were a few, absolutely.
wow, okay.
The lucky few, I call them.
Yeah.
I would say the majority for sure were part of the leak. It's just such a massive one. And, we should divulge, this leak did occur some time ago at this point, but since then there's been other really big leaks. I'm going to be working on a story on that massive AT&T leak as well coming up. There's a settlement there. The point is that there's always these breaches happening, so you really need to be on top of it and know what information is out there.
I mean, honestly, Diane, your story, it showed our health insurance company that we have at work was hacked.
Yeah.
The South Carolina Department of Revenue was hacked at one point. So if you pay taxes in the state of South Carolina, you got hacked.
Yeah.
The healthcare systems get hacked. Cable company gets it. It does seem like, and the people in your story had this resignation, it is inevitable
Right.
that your personal information will be hacked. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is then, well, if it's inevitable, then what can I do? And really, why should I do anything at this point? So here's the answer. First, Gordon, I want you to show our viewers the cell phone video.
Okay,
this was taken from my own cell phone. I searched the word password because I use the password manager, which is a very smart thing to do, by the way.
Me too.
One thing that was unsmart is that I've never checked to see which passwords were compromised, but password manager knows that.
It looks like the answer is all of them.
Yeah. If
Look,
you scroll
Hillary,
down,
take that
and you
full.
mentioned
Here we go.
healthcare, there's Prisma Health right there. They had a
Yep.
breach.
That's your
we do
doctor's
know that.
office.
That's my
Yep.
doctor's office. There's a lot of different,
Somebody's
things on
watching
here.
your Hulu right now.
Yeah, Netflix we got, and some of the random ones are compromised as well.
Now, these are all healthcare accounts that
Yep.
just went by.
Exactly. And if you scroll back up, my Capital One, my credit card, and I just found this
boy.
out, recently, and it's something that I'm obviously going to be working on to fix those passwords. But that's why this is so important. It's really important to know if you are on that major hack list, so that you can take action.
That pen, it's Pen Tester. Let's pull that
Pen
up.
Tester.
So here it is. This
so
is
you
the
would,
website.
you would pull this website up, and you would enter your email, only your first and last name, the state, and your birth year. So we can all acknowledge that information's already out there. You're not giving Pen Tester anything extra. Okay. When I did this, Gordon, and I obviously blurred out a lot of stuff, I mean, it showed where the major breaches are, the recent ones that put my information into the hands of obviously nefarious actors. So what you have blurred out there they have my social security number, they have some of my passwords, they know my exact address, they know the year, and we know, you can see that sharethis.com, which I don't even know what that is, but that was some sort of a breach connected. So that's probably like third-party marketing, or when you're on public Wi-Fi, sometimes they share with other marketers and it can be passed along. So who knows what that is? But the AT&T one we mentioned was part of that critical breach. And it's important to understand that, because you might be able to, for instance, with AT&T, that settlement, they're going to be allowing people to collect some settlement funds if you can show that you were hacked. And so we'll be telling people how to do that when more information is given out about that. But it really is crucial. For me, I know this. After seeing that, there is no doubt that I'm going to make it a top priority to recheck those passwords that I really thought most of those were safe. I have unique passwords for all those different sites.
That's what I was going to ask you. You reuse passwords for
I
any
don't.
of these? These are all different passwords?
There are very few that I reuse for, and they're like those ones that I don't have to give hardly any information, like my first, last name, and maybe my email that I have traditionally. Now, I might use my password manager in a different way. I might say, let's go ahead and have the password manager create these crazy, unique, long passwords that don't make any sense and remember it for me, because clearly I'm not doing a good job coming up with passwords that aren't, staying valid.
You know what's frustrating about this kind of story is, one of the credit agencies that you showed in your story was hacked.
Yeah.
They have everything about you, and none of us signed up for that.
Right.
You mentioned Share This appeared on yours. I looked them up. They are, as you suspected, sort of a third-party data analytics website that you never signed up for.
No.
You never consented to give them your information, but they get hacked and your information's out there.
Yeah.
Is there any recourse as a consumer that I can take?
Well,
because
interesting
I got
that you
hacked?
mentioned that. I did a story fairly recently on where we covered that aspect, and you can do things to kind of minimize your footprint. That was the topic of the story, where you do contact these data brokers and request that they take your information down. However, here's the problem. There are not hundreds, there's more than 1,000 data brokers. And so it would be a laborious task to do that. You could also spend some money and hire companies to try to do that for you, which might be money well spent depending on the situation you're in. And there are other ways, but just, being safe, having good passwords, staying off public Wi-Fi, having a virtual private network to protect you, all those kind of things can offer some greater protection. I think the big point with this story is just that you cannot be blasé about these breaches because, just what you saw in my own situation, and go check your own cell phone and those passwords, there's a really good chance that they are on the black market. And if that's the case, think of how much private information you have just in your email alone. If they can get into your email, you may not even know. They might get in and share that information and you may not know until a major attack is launched or something happens that's kind of funky with your bank account.
And there is sort of a second step to this. You mentioned two-factor authentication. That's where, in addition to your password, then they will give you a code that they text to your cell phone or something like that. And then there is a social hacking element where those hackers will then try to get you to reveal to them what that password is so they can beat your two-factor authentication.
Exactly, and glad you brought that up because that is exactly why on places like social media where you share a lot of private information, maybe your mom's maiden name, maybe your children's names, things like that you might base a password on, they are gleaning all of that and using AI now. It's so easy for them to just compile this dossier on you just at the click of a button, and they have all this private information and can guess all this stuff. So it's definitely a real threat.
And finally, it sounds like maybe bottom line here, for people who are watching this right now, the one step that you can take, the one thing that will really protect you from the truly disastrous outcomes is to freeze your credit. People cannot open a bank account. They cannot take a loan, even if they have all your information, if your credit is frozen, right?
Right. That's number one. I would say there is a second thing, and that's to make sure that specifically your banking information is under a separate email account that is very secure because you have a very difficult, unique password and you never share that information with anyone else, and you have that two-step authentication set up, hopefully with some biometrics as well. Most of the banking organizations now allow like voice recognition and things like that. And you can also use an authenticator, which is a separate app that you can have to make sure that anyone who doesn't have access to your phone cannot, which usually is not you, cannot do anything nefarious. So I would say making sure that your banking accounts are as safe as you possibly can. And like you said, making sure you freeze your credit. And just to reiterate, freezing your credit is totally free in the state of South Carolina to both freeze and unthaw as many times as you want. And personal experience, it is extremely easy to call and have them freeze it or to do it online. Does not take long. You do have to do it 3 times because you have to do it at all 3 credit reporting agencies.
Same though. I've done it. In fact, I did it when you recommended it because somebody got our information on one of these hacks and tried to open credit card accounts. And the only reason I knew about it was the same company that was issuing these credit cards. And the only reason I knew about it is they said, congratulations, you've been approved for this new credit card. And I thought, oh no.
It was amazing. And I know we might have mentioned this story at one point, but Gordon and I were sitting next to each other in the newsroom, and he heard me like a week earlier or something, or a couple of days earlier, Gordon, taking a call where my credit card company had actually seen some funky activity and called me and said, did you open this new credit card? And I said, no, I did not. They're like, okay, well, you've been hacked clearly. Yep. And then you got the same thing a couple days later. So
same thing. So my credit's frozen, yours is frozen. And if you're watching right now, it's a great step to take, especially if you use these tools we've showed you to find out that you have been hacked. And frankly, you probably have. We've got some more great advice coming up from consumer expert Diane Lee after we take a very short break. And welcome back, everybody. Diane Lee, Gordon Dill. We are here to help. And now, Diane, we're going to talk about, it sounds like a medical emergency, bad gas.
I knew you were going to say that, Gordon.
It's too easy.
Yeah, don't worry. We were all joking about it when I was doing the story. But the truth is that many people have experienced and are quite vocal when they pump up their car with gas and then drive off and have issues. And it happens more than you think.
When I posted that I was doing a story about contaminated fuel a few weeks ago, I was surprised by how many of you responded saying your car had been affected. I'm 7 News consumer anchor Diane Lee, and I looked into what drivers should know, including the first thing you should do if you suspect you've pumped your vehicle with bad gas. When one of your most costly possessions stops working, it's downright disturbing. Especially for people like Joel Willard in Spartanburg, whose wife's car quit running shortly after she filled up, and he had to tow it to a mechanic.
A couple hours later, he called me and said, "Hey, I need you to come over here. I want to show you something." So I immediately went to his shop, and he had a glass container, and he had pumped gas through the gas line into that glass container, and it was mostly water.
Technicians at Fairway Ford say they see bad gas issues several times a month, usually water contamination. Often the car won't start, but when it does,
and that's when you start having that skipping sensation, bucking sensation, lack of power, those type of things.
And that can really do some damage.
It's possible, yes. If enough water is introduced, you could actually have the piston come up and bend the connecting rod in the engine because that water will not compress.
and if you don't get that water dried out, it could corrode metal fuel pump components, leading to lots of issues down the road. Mechanics say drivers should fill up at gas stations that see a lot of volume and are newer. That way the fuel isn't sitting in storage for too long, and those tanks are made of a polymer plastic, much less susceptible to leaching than old steel tanks. Willard called the gas station to report the contamination, and then a good friend steered him in the right direction.
He said, "Nuh-uh." He said, "Here's what you need to do. You need to call the Department of Agriculture, and they will send somebody out to test it." He said, "Because the company may not be straight up with you."
So we'll do a 5-gallon test, and it's got to fall in our range.
Shannon Galt with the Department of Agriculture says fuel inspectors test more than 64,000 gas pumps each year in the state, making sure the gallons and octane are accurate. When a consumer files a report, how quickly can you act?
So that's our number one priority. When we get the report from Columbia, when they notify us, we are to immediately go and obtain that sample from the location that they're sending us to.
On each pump, you'll see a certification sticker, helpful information if you have to file a report. In the least, you'll need the station address and pump number. What happens if you do find contaminated gas?
Yeah, so we will provide a sample of the report to the consumer who called in the complaint, as well as to the gas station. If we find contaminated gas, we are going to stop the sale of that fuel at the gas station.
I called the company and I said, "Hey, did y'all find out anything?" She said, "Yeah, we did. We checked it and we didn't have any water in it." And I said, "Well, it's a funny thing that your pumps are shut down because the Department of Agriculture shut you down because you do have water." And she said, "Let me check on that."
Armed with the state's report, Willard got the company to cover hundreds of dollars in repairs.
Thank goodness I had the Department of Agriculture involved, because that particular company, who's no longer around, they were not going to pay for my repairs, and it was absolutely their fault.
You alluded to this, Diane, as we went into that report, that you got a lot of feedback on this.
Yeah.
How common would you say this is?
It's really interesting. When I went to go find somebody, I just, went online and I typed in bad gas in our local area, and I couldn't believe the number of people who commented. I had done a post as well, and I was actually blown away. I didn't realize it was such an issue. They were naming certain gas stations where they suspected water, and that really is the main culprit. In fact, when I spoke with the mechanic, and I'm not going to be naming any names right now, but when I spoke with the mechanic, they were saying there's literally a gas station near them that, because it's in kind of a valley-ish area, it does collect more water, and they tend to see problems from cars coming out of there all the time. So Gordon, I would say drivers need to pay attention to not only whether the location and whether there might be like water buildup, but also how frequently the gas is pumped. How common is it for cars to kind of come through? Because if gas is sitting for too long, you're also going to potentially run the risk of getting some contaminants which sink to the bottom of the tank, and you're being pulled from the bottom of the tank. So that also that may not be very good for the car as well. So you want to keep those two factors in mind.
So first of all, it sounds like a lot of these gas stations actually might not be aware of the contamination that's getting into their gas tank.
Yeah, definitely. They may not know that water has leaked in, and certainly when a car goes off and has trouble, that it's the burden of proof situation. So if you have a really good company and you address it with them, then you might get a repair covered. But all too often, it is difficult to prove. Obviously the mechanics might see a bit of a pattern, and so you might get some help there. But I don't think you're going to have any specific mechanic also wanting to go on the line there either.
Maybe not. And then, so maybe the number one thing to look out for is busy gas stations are better.
Yeah,
They're
busy
pumping more
gas
gas.
stations.
There's more gas going through the line. It stays cleaner.
Right, definitely. And here's the other thing that people really need to keep in mind, and this is what this gentleman did that I talk with in the story. You've got to act very, very fast. So he probably would not have had his repairs covered had the U.S. Department of Agriculture not been able to go very quickly and test the gas, because usually it's on a daily basis that gas stations will get the gas replaced and it's used up. And so that issue may have no longer been there by the time they had gone to test if he had waited. So you have to act fast in these situations and report this directly to the South Carolina Department of Agriculture. You might be happy to hear that they do act quickly. So here's what you would do. This is the exact page within the Department of Agriculture's site that explains, does the South Carolina Department of Agriculture conduct testing, and it has all of that. And it has the number there that you would call, the 803 number right away to report. It's right there in the middle of the screen, 803-737-9700. And so you may just want to put that in your phone. Just have that in your phone. I'm not saying that you'll ever run into a bad gas situation, but if you do, at least you can call that so quickly. Also it'd be wise for people to have just the DOT number in their phone if they run into an incident on, one of the highways.
So by and large, I mean, obviously, I don't know what's going into my gas tank when I'm pumping fuel necessarily. It's a matter of you're probably not noticing until the engine starts knocking, or you're hearing a rattling. Something's gone wrong from the gas.
Yes,
you know it.
And it's usually going to happen very soon after. It may not happen right as you turn the car on, mechanics have told me, but it's going to happen probably within that 24 hours afterwards that you might experience something. Sometimes it will happen right after you turn on the car and try to leave, and you'll feel a bit of that kind of that jolt and that knocking. So, when in doubt, definitely do not drive it far. Go right to a mechanic, because you could do more long-term damage if you don't get that water taken out of your system, if it is water.
Go right to the mechanic and then call Department of Agriculture, or maybe
call the Department of Agriculture first, get them over to test it, and then go to the mechanic, because you're going to have a mechanic's bill, and you want to try to get that covered if you can, if it's not your fault.
You know what's tough about that, though? I mean, look, money is tight for a lot of us. Yeah. And by the way, we're also all very, very busy. And so you hear a rattling in your car, you sense a problem with your car, and oh yes, I filled up 18 hours ago. Maybe I can take care of it in 24, 40, maybe it'll go away.
Right.
We do that with everything. And the number one piece of advice you're giving is you just can't afford to do that.
Yeah, don't wait. I mean, especially make that call to the Department of Agriculture. That's not going to take any more of your time than just 5 minutes. At least you'll have answers, and then maybe call your mechanic and say, here's what I'm hearing, and I just pumped up gas. Do you think I need to come? And they might be able to kind of diagnose a bit over the phone, the service people, before you head in. I will say that the important thing is to make sure you identify the pump, as I mentioned in the story. And now, after doing this story, I'm a big believer in saving your receipts. I know we're always asked that question. Do you want the receipt or not?
Receipts when you pump gas?
I definitely do.
How many do you have? Do you have?
I have a bunch.
100 receipts? Do you have a year's worth?
I do, but if you'll remember, and for our viewers who have recently moved to South Carolina, I want to inform them it's good to save your tax receipts, because there's a law that actually for your state taxes you can get a slight reduction if you submit either the receipts or repairs on your car that would allow you to be able to account for what was a gas tax increase. And so that still is in effect. So there's a double reason to save the receipts. But if you don't want to save it for that purpose, that would be saving it for the whole year, then just at least save it for a week or two, and then you can throw it out.
So until maybe you pump the next tank of gas.
Yeah, exactly. That's the smart thing to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I have never kept a gasoline receipt. So maybe that's a behavior I need to change.
And the reason why it's good is because the gasoline receipt has not only the gas station, its address, but it also has your exact pump number.
What time you were there
exactly. The time you were there, so you can show that proof. And actually, I just had a viewer email me about a similar issue, not bad gas, but the gas station was advertising $2.55 for a gallon. And so she filled up at this gas station, even though the one across the street was $2.99, and then noticed on her receipt that she was actually being charged $2.99, even though the sign said $2.55.
Surprise.
Yeah, so you might actually learn something new from the receipt, and you can check up to make sure everything's on the up and up.
I know gas complaints, especially when gas prices are high,
Yes.
are something that people are very alert to, and that especially that issue of being overcharged. And Diane, you talked to the mechanic. Something as simple as getting water into those pistons, getting water into that. He mentioned bending one of the connecting rods. That is a major bill. That is a huge expense if it happens to your car.
That
it
would
could
be
put you
major.
out thousands of
Definitely.
dollars.
Now, granted, something like that may take time to actually go into effect. The rusting certainly would take time, but it'll happen one day or another if you do not get the water out. In the least, your car won't run smoothly until you get that out.
You'll know something is wrong, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, you have been watching Here to Help with consumer expert Diane Lee. I'm Gordon Dill, hosting once again for you today. We'll be back with a brand new episode, more money-saving, scam-avoiding tips when you join us next time.